The PPI reports have taken almost everybody by surprise, shocking the market and I think dramatically changing what comes next over the next couple of weeks. So I want to talk about that specifically because I do think that this has quite large implications for crypto. And for those of you who have been in crypto for a while, you may know things take off immediately and seemingly out of nowhere. So just make sure that you are ready. I do think that we could potentially be getting close to that type of situation. So I want to talk a little bit about what we've seen today. So first off, we're going to take a look at the crypto bubbles. We can see here a nice little bounce through the day just because of some of the news that we have seen, because we did see the PPI reports come in cooler than expected. We will kind of fully dive into all of those a little bit later on in the video. So stay tuned if you are interested in checking those out. Also, if you would, just feel free to like the video as we're going through because it does really help me get pushed further on into the algorithm. So it would really help me out. But moving along, we can see obviously that the market is moving relatively nicely today. Couple reds here and there, but overall it still is moving fairly decently. We can see also that the altcoin season indicator continues to move closer and closer. Altseason, it is inching there slowly but surely, and I think this has been a nice kind of steady and sustained climb into altseason, which I do think is actually a pretty good sign. It's hard to say, right? I mean, it's almost impossible to know for sure exactly if we are going to see this kind of peak all the way back in and we'll stay in alt season for a while, or if maybe we will just kind of see a short little jump in and come back out. Again, as I've said, things happen very, very suddenly in the world of crypto, so we'll just have to kind of see exactly what happens there. Now, moving along, you can see based off of the news today, we do have a little bit of a jump out of Bitcoin. This, of course, is very, very good news. You can see here, if we were to move this, we're actually kind of looking at about this $112,500 resistance. This was a very, very strong resistance. If we go into the hourly, we can see we actually have broken through that basically almost immediately. We've seen several runs up against this level of resistance, but based off of the PPI news, we saw a very, very strong pump through that immediately. And then again, we are kind of consolidating above this level, which is very good to see. And then again, 114,000 is kind of like that next micro level of resistance here. We are currently below the $114,000 mark for Bitcoin. So we'll have to see if we can get above it, or if we maybe do some sort of consolidation kind of between these two key levels of support and resistance at that $112,000 and $114,000 mark. We can also see Ethereum making a little bit of a move, but relatively kind of staying pinched between like this $4,500 and the $4,200 range. Nothing really happening too crazy here. I would imagine at some point we start to see these Bollinger Bands pinch down a little bit. For those of you who don't know, when we start to see the Bollinger Bands pinch, there generally is some level of kind of major volume and volatility. You can kind of see it happening here. We see the pinch and then we see an explosion to the upside. We see a pinch, we see a breakout to the upside. This one we kind of saw, several pinches here and there. Nothing really kind of too much happening though. So it's not always necessarily a guarantee, but many times it does actually indicate a move. So we might be able to see this pinch kind of starting to happen a little bit just because we've seen price consolidating so long up until this point. So we'll just have to see for sure and just kind of take it as it comes, and we'll see how it goes. But as you can see here, we have actually opened a trade on Tau. So Tau we are working with right now, relatively small position. Again, nothing really too crazy for what we're doing right now, but we do have that Tau position open. It's up about 40%. Also, our Zebek position is up about 40%. This one's kind of just been chopping around here and there. You can also see we opened up this ICP position a while back. This one also is basically just kind of chopped around and not really done anything too crazy. And then our Ondo position just slightly negative, down about 5%. But I feel pretty good about Ondo. I do like Ondo and think that one will perform. So I'm just kind of holding this one. Of course, I do have my take profits and stop losses set for each. So if you are interested, of course, I do have those links in the description below if you want to get signed up and start trading. Again, these are not calls that I'm making. I don't necessarily say exactly when I open or close positions, but these are just generally things that I do talk about on the channel. When we will open some of these positions, I will talk about them and just kind of give you some of my reasoning as to why. Of course, there are not kind of offers or solicitations to buy. These are just my opinions and what I am doing within the crypto space. I've been watching crypto YouTube for years, and sometimes, oftentimes I wish I kind of had somebody that told me kind of when they were getting in and out of things and just their opinions. Of course, I would go and make my own decisions, but it's nice to have that little kind of other perspective when you are trying to figure out what you should be doing within the crypto market. So I also still have our XRP trade open as well. This one up about 35%. This one's looking really, really nice. Actually going to be having an XRP video coming out a little bit later today, where we are going to be talking about specifically what's about to happen, and things are looking like we might be in a pretty good position. So we're going to be talking about that as well. So moving along, if you have any questions or anything like that, or want to get signed up, all of the links and everything like that are in the description below. I do have BTCC, BloFin, as well as Weex. BTCC currently does offer far and away the best rewards bonus of that 10% bonus on first time deposits. If you are interested, of course, you can go check that and use my link in the description below, because it is kind of one of those exclusive affiliate links. So if you want to check that out, feel free. Otherwise, we will continue along and let's talk more about what we're seeing out of the PPI whole situation, because what happened today was actually fairly shocking. So we're going to kind of break it down and see what we saw from the PPI print today. So we can see here, first off, coming from some commentary on James Fishbach. Again, not necessarily too concerned about the political, as you may understand or may expect. There's a lot of political kind of frenzy surrounding a core economic issue. Not necessarily too concerned about the politics of it all. What I'm really focused on is this right here, which is the expectation was about a 0.3% increase month over month. We actually saw deflation in August, which is fairly uncommon for us to see deflation month over month. Now, that does not mean we are in a deflationary market, but we have seen kind of this limited stint of deflation, which is pretty interesting. So the other interesting piece as well is we saw that the prior print of 0.9% kind of month over month growth was actually reduced or revised to 0.7% month over month growth. Again, similarly seeing things down here as well. Man, I am certainly tripping up over my words today. I just simply cannot speak, apparently. But we can see, all of this kind of getting revised down, making the economy feel and appear potentially cooler than what it was even just a month ago. And so I think this is definitely playing towards the argument to cut rates. And so we'll have to kind of see, and we'll have to track very, very closely what's actually going on here. But I think right as of now, rate cuts are virtually guaranteed. Two clips or 50 basis points of cuts is possible. It's somewhere within the range of possibility, but I would not say it's likely. I think on Polymarket it's sitting somewhere between 15 to 18%, and per the Fed, the Fed watch that's done by CME, that's sitting at around 10% currently. Now, moving along, we can also see this is kind of like the month over month. These are the annualized numbers. So the annualized numbers fell from about 3.3% to 2.6% for the August PPI inflation, and then core PPI fell to 2.8, below expectations of 3.5%. The month over month PPI inflation was negative just for the second time since March 2024. Again, kind of indicating that rate cuts are very, very likely on their way. Another notable thing here, kind of as we had mentioned, the July PPI inflation data was revised lower, with the headline PPI down from 3.3 to 3.1, and July's core down from 3.7 to 3.4. So things definitely kind of cooling off. We also do have CPI inflation coming tomorrow as well. So these are going to be kind of the two big prints of the month before we get that meeting here in about a week, where the Fed decides if they're going to cut rates, and if so, by how much. So again, as I have mentioned, it's looking virtually guaranteed at this point that we are going to see rates get cut. How much is kind of what remains to be seen. If we see a super, super cool print off of CPI, potentially the argument for that 50 basis points of rate cuts comes into play. I think really we're going to see the odds shift fairly dramatically based on what we see tomorrow, as well as the revisions too. The revisions have gotten pretty aggressive here over the past couple of years, where the numbers change quite dramatically. So I think seeing the revisions that happened, particularly since we saw a fairly hot July print, if we see them get revised lower to cool down a little bit, then maybe that does kind of impact kind of what happens there at least a little bit. So I'm going to be watching very, very closely for all of that. as we start to see all of this though, I mean, this continues to build the case for cutting rates. The thing that people are not considering though is we also have an economy that is playing into this as well. So if the economy slows down too much and if the economy gets too shaky, there is always that possibility that we fall right past the possibility of alt season and straight into something like a recession or some sort of fiscal crisis. And that is always a risk that does remain, particularly when we're like, well, we want the economy to be like bad enough to have like cheap and easy money, but we don't want it good enough to have high rates, because that's generally kind of where crypto fits the best, is kind of right in that middle range. But of course, that is a little bit of a careful dance to be making. So I just want to kind of call that out as well, is that, you know, be careful what you wish for sometimes. Sometimes if the economy gets too bad, then there's going to be a lot more aggressive stimulation that needs to happen. And in that case, we may even just have to cancel alt season, at least for this go around. Or maybe it already happened in one of those kind of less exciting periods back in like the end of 2024, or maybe even the early part of 2024 as well. So again, just remain open to all outcomes, all possibilities. Getting locked into one kind of preordained or predestined outcome that you want to happen is generally a really, really dangerous thing to do. So just be careful, make sure that you're staying vigilant, take the data as it comes, and try to figure out what could happen next based on what we've seen. I think a lot of what we're seeing right now doesn't necessarily change a whole lot. I think rate cuts have basically already been priced in. If something happens where the rate cuts dramatically shift to maybe like 50 or 75 or even 100 basis points cuts, well, then that's of course going to shock the market and major things will change. But I just don't see anything like that really happening right now, which is why we're seeing a slight pump through the crypto market, but nothing just absolutely wild. And so I think where we're at seems to make a decent bit of sense. Overall, though, I am always paying attention and making sure that we're able to trade on this information, invest on this information, all this type of stuff to the best of our ability. So if you do find the information in this video useful, feel free to drop and hit that like and subscribe. Of course, it does always help me out, as well as hopefully it helps you out because you're staying up to date with this information right off the press as it comes along. Also, you can feel free to hit that notification bell so you are stayed up to date of when I release new stuff. So anyway, thank you all so much for tuning in. Also, if you have any comments, questions, anything like that, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments, your feedback, all of that type of stuff. It is very, very helpful. So if you have anything that you want me to see, that is also a great way to do so. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.